Is this the Red Sox next big move? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin. The Red Sox seem pretty hell-bent on getting their starters on the trade market. They just completed one of the biggest trades in Red Sox history. Now it looks like they're turning their attention to another guy, so that's what we are breaking down in today's video. We're talking about the latest Red Sox potential trade target. We're going to talk about why it makes sense, why it doesn't, to ultimately figure out if this is something we want the Red Sox to do. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. So the trade that we are talking about today is the Red Sox acquiring Luis Castillo from the Seattle Mariners. Now, this was something that has been brought up over the last couple of days. I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. It started with John Morrissey reporting on MLB Network that, quote, the Red Sox are working to acquire one of the Mariners starting pitchers, sources say. Now, that obviously doesn't specify Luis Castillo, and immediately, I think a lot of people's minds go to Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, even a guy like George Kirby or Logan Gilbert, but then local Seattle beat reporters sort of brought up Luis Castillo's name as the guy the Red Sox could be looking at, because right after that, they confirmed John Morrissey's report by saying that the Red Sox have been pretty persistent for one of their starters and officially linked Castillo to the Red Sox, saying a Casas for Castillo trade makes some sense for both sides. First and foremost, no, it does not. A trade between the Seattle Mariners for Luis Castillo involving Triston Casas, to me, makes absolutely no sense at all. We've talked about the reasons why I think trading Triston Casas for anyone but Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in an extension or a legitimate frontline ace starting pitcher, which Luis Castillo, good, is not, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for this Red Sox team. But two, it officially links Luis Castillo to the Red Sox, and I do think there is some legitimate reasons why the Red Sox should be interested in this. First and foremost, Luis Castillo is a proven innings eating starter. I think that's the most important part of this whole thing. The Red Sox have a really talented rotation right now without any additions, right? They've got potential ace in Garrett Crochet. They've got all-star starting pitcher Tanner Houck. They've got high ceiling Brian Bayo. I know he's yet to get to that ceiling, but at the same time, too, it's still there. Cutter Crawford looks pretty solid. We know what Lucas Giolito can be if he's healthy. So you've got a whole lot of talent in there. What you don't have is a lot of proven, legitimate starter qualities that we've seen displayed over multiple years, kind of like a 2021 Evaldi-esque player, and I think Luis Castillo could be that guy. Over his 8 years in Major League Baseball, he has been pretty successful. It's a 3.56 ERA with a 3.71 FIP, so still really solid in terms of the fielding independent pitching, a 1.176 WHIP, and a 1.20 ERA plus, about 20% above league average production during those 8 years, and he's still pitching fairly well. This season, it was a 3.64 ERA, so it was below 4 with a bit higher 3.91 FIP, so there was a tiny bit of luck involved in that ERA with a still fairly low 1.169 WHIP and a 101 ERA plus. 1% above league average production, but really basically right at that league average production mark. He's also historically been a legitimate innings eating pitcher, which I think is another plus for this Red Sox team. If you take out his rookie season in which he debuted halfway through it, and you take out obviously the shortened 2020 season, the 6 years he's pitched a full season at the big league level, he's averaging 178 innings pitched per year. Last year, he had 175 innings pitch, which would put him basically right in that Cutter Crawford, Tanner Houck type mix with this Red Sox rotation. I think that really does mean a lot for the Boston Red Sox. I think getting a guy who's been a veteran, who's been a high-performing veteran at the Major League level is actually really important for the Red Sox success in 2025. I think getting him in here and not only obviously getting that level of production from this guy, but also giving someone for Crochet, for Houck, for Bayo, for other players to really lean on when it comes to, hey, How do you get through this hump? How do you make this adjustment, right? I think that's a really, really important thing for these young players. So statistically, it does make sense for the Red Sox on a couple of different levels, but I also think monetarily, this does make sense for the Red Sox as well to some degree. Obviously, you're taking on some legitimate money here with Luis Castillo, which is something apparently, despite everything we've heard this offseason, John Henry is absolutely terrified to do. But at the same time, too, it's also probably not going to be as much as if you were to, heaven forbid, pay a starting pitcher what the value is on the open market this season. Because going forward, you would have Luis Castillo under control for a pretty decent period of time. He's worth $24 million a year here for the next 3 seasons with a vesting option of a 4th year that kicks in if he pitches 180 innings in 2027. This not only is a cheaper alternative to what is available in free agency, it's also going to make his value on the trade market much lower than it probably should be, because the Seattle Mariners most likely aren't going to take on a whole lot of this salary. All of a sudden, Luis Castillo's value on paper drops a little bit. If we're just going to look at the dollar value attached to Luis Castillo and what that does to his value, hypothetically, the Red Sox could trade for this guy for just Zach Penrod, according to baseball trade values. I don't think that's necessarily the case, right? Obviously, with pitching being a premium this offseason, immediately that value is going to be a bit more. And with the Seattle Mariners not really wanting to ultimately have to trade someone from their rotation, which they've been pretty adamant about this entire offseason, despite their rumors of not wanting to spend money in free agency basically at all, you're going to have to wow them a bit with this trade, which is why Tristan Casas' name has come up a few times, but I do think there is a legitimate alternative that works for both sides. I think if the Red Sox sent over Wilyer Abreu for Luis Castillo and Mitch Garver, it makes some sense for both teams here. This is a big overpay by the Red Sox if we're just talking purely value, but it does do 2 important things. Well, really 3. 1, it allows you to avoid using an area where you don't have a lot of depth in to make this trade work. 2, it allows the Red Sox to fill 2 really big problems. Obviously, getting in another frontline-ish starting pitcher, right? I think Luis Castillo at this point in his career is more of a mid-rotation starter, a top mid-rotation starter, maybe a solid number 2, maybe a really good number 3, but it allows you to bring someone like that in here. It also allows you to fix a hole that you have massively sitting there on your bench right now, which is your backup catcher. Mitch Garver, not the greatest defensive catcher in the world, but he's league average. And league average right now is a really big difference for the Red Sox considering who they have behind the plate. So the Red Sox get a catcher, they get a starting pitcher, they give up Wilyer Abreu, which is a big haul, but it's also somewhere where you can fill that depth pretty easily. For the Seattle Mariners, they get a Rookie of the Year finalist, a legitimate power bat. They get a guy who is going to bring offensive production to a team that had no offensive production last year. And yes, the Seattle Mariners have a solid outfield right now, but a guy like Victor Robles had a whole lot of holes in his game last year. I don't expect him to have a season like he had this year in Seattle. So you bring in Wilyer, you automatically make your offense better. You still have a ton of really great starting pitching with a couple of guys coming up from AAA, so you're pretty quickly able to replace that depth as well. I think this makes sense for both teams. So if you look at it, to some degree, I think this makes a lot of sense for the Red Sox. There's a whole lot of positives here when we're talking about Luis Castillo, but I also think there are some things that absolutely need to be talked about in terms of some words of caution for the Boston Red Sox. So let's talk about some reasons why the Red Sox may not want to make this deal. Honestly, I think the biggest sort of, hey, wait a second here thing for the Boston Red Sox, their sort of cautionary tale right now, is that Luis Castillo has been kind of on a downward trend over the last few years. If we go back to 2022, he was really fantastic. He had a 2.99 ERA. His FIP was at just 3.07. It was right around that ERA number. But in 2023, it did jump up a bit, 3.34 ERA, still, again, really solid, but the FIP really jumped up to a 3.81. All of a sudden, you're starting to see a little bit of a downward trend, and then obviously this year, the ERA was at 3.64, and the FIP was at 3.91. Every year over the last 3 years, that ERA has taken a jump up as well as that FIP, which means it's not because of luck. It's not because of bad defense behind him. It's because of the way he is pitching. And to me, that's a bit of a concern for multiple different reasons. One, obviously, the Red Sox are going to have to put significant payroll into Luis Castillo. And for a guy who's on the decline, I think that's a bit of a red flag. But also, because if they are going to take him on, looking at that contract, you're not getting the prime years of Luis Castillo. You're getting Luis Castillo until he's 35 years old. So that's a little bit of a risk as well. I think if you're the Red Sox, in order to make this trade, you have to be pretty confident that you're going to be able or understand how you're going to be able to really reverse this trend. The rumors being that the Red Sox are very interested in this. I think they do have an understanding of what they can do to reverse this trend, but that would absolutely scare me if I was this front office, especially with the players that you're going to have to attach to get this deal done. And I think that's the second sort of cautionary tale here with Luis Castillo, is that hypothetically, yeah, Luis Castillo checks off a lot of boxes, but you know who else checks off a lot of boxes, John Henry? Someone on the free agent market, right? A guy like Walker Buehler, who, yes, has had a couple of tough years, but if you are confident he is healthy and could be good to go, that could be a guy who could do the exact same thing. Jack Flaherty, again, obviously there are question marks there, but again, if you are confident like you are in Luis Castillo, could be a guy who could do the exact same thing. And I know this is really scary to think about, but paying Corbin Burnes would also do the exact same thing. And you wouldn't have to give up this prospect capital that it's probably going to take to get Luis Castillo on this team. And I think that's the biggest thing I struggle with this trade. It's just simply, why are we giving up prospects or legitimate impact big leaguers to get this deal done if you could just go out and pay somebody to do the job and then utilize those guys to get something else that you desperately need? Now, I know at some point they're going to need to trade someone from this big league roster if they want to fit in some of these really, really encouraging up-and-coming prospects, but is this the guy they want to do it for? I don't really know if it's worth the total value, and I think that's sort of where I'm stuck on this Luis Castillo deal. Overall, taking a look at it, trying to come to some conclusion, weighing the good with the bad, I'm kind of dead in the middle here. I don't know if you guys can tell. I think there are legitimate positives for Luis Castillo. I think personally, if they were to trade for him, I'd be pretty excited about it. I think it's someone, again, most importantly, who is an innings-eating veteran who can help out the rest of this rotation. But obviously, I think the statistics, even with the bit of a decline, could be a really solid addition to the Red Sox, especially if the Red Sox are under the understanding that they are going to be able to really sort of reverse that trend that we're seeing. But I also think there are some major risks here that are sort of unnecessary, especially with who's left on the free agent market. So ultimately, I think I need your guys' help to help me decide which side of the fence I want to land on. So let me know in the comment section down below. If you are for a Luis Castillo trade, let me know why in the comment section down below, and let me know what you'd be willing to give up to get him here. And if you're against him, let me know why as well. I want to see all your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you want to listen instead of watch these episodes, all you got to do is head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.